How's it going, everybody? Today is going to be a little bit more of a story time video because I'm going to be telling you all about something that happened like 2 years ago whenever I built my first gaming PC slash streaming setup slash editing station, like all in one basically. Let's go all the way back to where I had just gotten this new place and I finally had a shop. I could finally work on my hobbies and all of that. I was really excited, and for my entire life since I had been working on hobbies and projects, I always wanted to start a YouTube channel to kind of share that experience. So I knew that if I was going to be making YouTube videos, I would have to be processing the footage and editing it and uploading it and stuff like that. And in my spare time, since I wasn't able to work on hobbies, I had picked up gaming and I wanted to be able to do some fair bit of gaming as well. So I know what I wanted to build. I wanted to build my all-in-one gaming PC editing station setup. And I was excited about it. Only problem is I had never done anything like that before at all. I knew nothing about building custom PCs. All I had ever had was like an Xbox and that was it. So I did a ton of research and I ended up getting some really good parts, but it was certainly a trial by fire situation. And on top of all that, I ended up making it 10 times harder than it needed to be by going extra and trying to make it into a desk. Now, you might be asking yourself why I chose to build my PC into a desk. And the thing is, I didn't plan to originally. I wanted to build it in a normal case like a normal person, but what ended up happening is the case came in the mail and I went way overboard, and this case was just massive. It took up so much area. I couldn't put it on my desk, and even besides my desk on the floor, like I just couldn't find a good placement for it. It was just entirely too big. So I figured if I was going to be taking up that much space, I might as well be efficient with it and build it into the desk so that it wasn't like sitting on top or to the side, it just was the desk itself. In order to do this, I started by taking measurements of the cooler, the motherboard, everything that needed to go inside of the desk, and figuring out exactly how thick it needed to be. So to start building the base of the desk, I decided to use MDF board because it is compact, it's dense enough to screw the mounts into, but it also looks smooth and clean. It's not a whole bunch of boards joined together or anything like that. It just seemed like the smartest way to go. So I got a piece of MDF, I cut it to the size that I wanted my desk to be, and I took my motherboard, power supply, started mapping things out, drawing out where I wanted what to be, and marking where the mounts would need to go, things like that. And then it was just a matter of drilling the holes, putting the mounting hardware in place, and then I could actually get on with building the rest of the desk around the base piece that everything would be mounted to. So let's actually talk about the design aspects a little bit. For the baseboard, I had to make a couple cutouts. I had to make one beside the I/O panel of the motherboard to allow the cords to be able to run back and forth to whatever they needed to go to, and underneath the power supply, I had to make a cutout hole for the fan to properly be able to blow through. With the baseboard being taken care of, it was time to actually build the rest of the desk. Now, the easiest way to think of this is to think of it as a smaller box inside of the box desk. Because on each side, there is actually 2 walls, one of them for ventilation and the other one to be the edge of the desk. The walls that were intended for ventilation, I cut these big holes in to be able to accommodate 140mm fans. So that would allow me to have 3 fans on each side, the 3 on one side pushing, the 3 on the other side pulling, and just vacuuming air over that system 24/7. But with the ventilation taken care of and the proper holes to run everything through, all it was simply putting legs on the bottom and then giving it a nice coat of paint, and yeah, that was pretty much the desk. Now, whenever it came to actually mounting everything in the desk, it wasn't that difficult at first because I had made measurements and I had double checked and everything actually fit in there well. So I put the motherboard in place, no big deal. I put the power supply in place, no big deal. The first thing I ran into an issue with was the graphics card, because graphics cards come with this metal bracket that is intended to slot into a PC case. Now, given that the motherboard is flat on the bottom of the desk and the GPU has that metal bracket, it didn't want to sit down into the GPU slot. I had to take and bend that metal bracket out of the way so that I could properly fit the graphics card down into its slot. Aside from that though, I'd have to say the biggest headache that I faced was getting all the fans and RGB lighting to work properly. I had to mount this separate little board on the bottom side of the desk to plug all the lights, all the fans into, and get them to work. And doing all that wiring back and forth and making it look neat with cable management was a headache. I'm sorry I don't have much good footage of this at all, but it was just such a headache. I didn't have much time to actually worry about filming that much of it because I was just kind of figuring out as I went. But hey, at the end of the day, despite all the setbacks and everything, I actually got it built, and I'm so happy that I did. I love how this thing turned out, so without any further ado, here's the big reveal. Now, if you've been following along and you've already built PCs or you're looking to build one and you've been doing a lot of research and you know the basics of what goes into a PC, this is the time for all the little nerdy details about what components I went with and then the peripherals I used and just a general explanation of my overall setup. So, let's dive in. Starting with the CPU, I decided to go with Intel's i9-10900K. At the time I bought it, it was the top of the top, the cream of the crop. And it still holds up, honestly. Even though there's 2 more generations that have come out and it's been 2 years, it still kicks butt. It can handle 4K editing in real time in Adobe and the multitasking it can do with having a game running and also running OBS to record that game and stream it at the same time. Just the levels at which I can push this CPU and it not break is incredible. Now with all that performance comes a lot of heat, so it needed a good cooler, and I decided to go with the Noctua NHD15. It's an air cooler and it's very simple whenever it comes to installing it, but it is a beast. It is massive, like physically massive, but also just it handles all of that heat like nothing, just pushes it right away. I don't know what to say really. It's an air cooler, man. It works really good. Even now, there hasn't been a whole lot of other coolers that have come out that kind of challenge it or match it. It's still pretty much the cream of the crop. It's really good. For the graphics card, I decided to go with the 2080 Ti, and yes, this is where things got interesting. As far as performance goes, back then and now, it was a very, very good graphics card that can handle any game that I throw at it in 4K max settings, driving it on my 49-inch curved display. Like it's a really powerful graphics card. Now, the interesting aspect is the timing of it. This was literally like 2 months before the massive chip shortages of 2020 started. So, I got it not knowing that the next generation was coming out, and a lot of people were like, oh man, why didn't you wait for the 3000 series to come out? And I was like, oh man, I messed up because this is about to be obsolete in like 2 months. But what ended up happening, as a lot of you may know, is that the 3000 series, as soon as it launched, got completely bought out, and anyone who was trying to hop in on that scalping started buying up all the 2000 series, and pretty much all graphics cards were almost impossible to get a hold of, and if you could find them in stock, they were at scalper prices, 3, 4, 5 times as much as MSRP. So it was just wild and crazy, and I was sitting there with a 2080 Ti, happy that I had gotten it. Moving on with the PC components, let's talk about RAM, because this is one section where my lack of knowledge in general about PCs and stuff kind of held me back a little bit. I decided to go with DDR4 3000 MHz RAM, and it's a little less than what I need. I didn't realize just how much RAM processing 4K videos and so much of it in Premiere Pro would take. Now, gaming-wise, you don't really necessarily need that much RAM, but for editing and productivity like that, it really starts to eat into it, and there's a lot of times that it's quite noticeable and Premiere Pro starts to hang up a little bit. So, I'll probably be upgrading my RAM here in the future, and thankfully DDR5 has come out, but We'll talk about upgrades more, like I said. Now, whenever it comes to storage, this is also an area that I didn't really have enough experience to know about, because I didn't know how much space I would need, and I thought that it would be wasteful to be getting 10, 15 terabytes. So I went with one 2 terabyte Western Digital NVMe SSD drive. And it's great, but I've already filled it up, and I just had to get another one, only I went with a Samsung this time. So I'm probably going to be coming up with a lot more drives in the future, but that goes back to upgrades. We'll get to it. So I have all these high-end parts, and they're definitely sitting on a high-end motherboard. I definitely went a little bit overkill. I went with the Asus ROG Maximus XII Extreme Edition. Yes, that's a mouthful. Yes, it is a very overkill motherboard. It has so many features on it that even now, 2 years later, I haven't started using them all because I just don't know anything about them. There's a Thunderbolt 3 hub, like it's a card that goes on the motherboard, and I'm just now trying to figure out how to use it. So overall, super powerful, has all kinds of features that I can't even go over because I don't understand them all. There's just, it's so much, but it's a more than capable motherboard that was very much overkill, and yeah, it's good motherboard. Don't know what to say. But moving on, as you might have noticed, all these parts are very powerful and they draw a lot of power. And this is another area where I went very much overkill. I was like, what's the best power supply I can get? I know the 2080 Ti draws a lot of power, and I know the CPU draws a lot of power, so I want the best power supply I can get. And I went with a Corsair AX 1600 IW, I think that's what it is. It's a 1600 watt, 80 plus titanium rated power supply. It's very much overkill. Even now, with the new generation of graphics cards that are extremely power hungry, you can run two 3090s and the super powerful CPU, everything all at once, and it's still not maxing it out. Like, it is an incredibly powerful power supply. So there's all the components to the PC itself. Now let's move on to the peripherals and the setup as a whole. Now when it comes to peripherals, I had to make notes because there's so many titles of these things that are just letters and numbers, and I don't know why they do it that way, but it is what it is. At any rate, let's start off with my monitor. I went with a Samsung CRG9 49-inch ultra-wide curved display. Because it's so wide, it helps so much with productivity whenever you're managing a timeline in Adobe Premiere Pro, because I can have a full side of my screen dedicated to previewing, I can have the middle dedicated to the timeline, and I can have the other side of the screen dedicated to the folder that I'm pulling the files from. Like, whatever I'm dealing with, I have so much screen space to work with. Like, it's incredible for productivity and multitasking. I really love it. Really good monitor. Now, whenever it came to the mouse and keyboard, I wanted to have the nice, clean, wireless look on my desk, so I went with Logitech's Lightspeed wireless mouse and keyboard, the G502 mouse and the G915 keyboard. Overall, I am extremely impressed. I mean, if you look up reviews for these things on the internet, I mean, you see a lot of good reviews, a lot of good things said about them, and honestly, it holds up. The battery's great, the lighting's good, they feel like just genuine good quality materials. Overall, just really solid mouse and keyboard. Don't know much else to say because it's just really good. There's not a whole lot of things bad to be said about them. For my headset, I definitely ran into the issue of, oh my gosh, there are so many different options. How do I even possibly begin to choose which one? And I kind of just ended up kind of picking randomly. I went with the Corsair Virtuoso RGB, and I mean, what can I say? It's a headset. It does its job. It's decent quality audio. I mean, to be fair, it's pretty good quality audio. It's just a little bit uncomfortable on my head anyway, so I'm probably going to be upgrading in the future. But I mean, headset's a headset. Now, moving on to the streaming side of my setup, it's very basic. I mean, just beginner level because I don't stream a lot right now, but I do plan on it in the future, so I kind of prepared a little bit. I've got this Fifine microphone right here. Basic, works, does its job. I mean, you've been hearing it this whole time. And I've got the Logitech C922 webcam as a face cam. It's just a basic 1080p webcam. I mean, it's got good reviews, serves its purpose. And for my lights, I've got these Neewer studio lights. They're two-tone, and you can adjust them with dimmer switches, so you can make it more white or more warm. Like, it just depends on what you want. So overall, I have the basics if I want to start streaming. I have the light, mic, and webcam. So there you have it. That's the setup I've been using for the past 2 years, and it's really served me well, and I really like the setup. But it's time to talk a little bit about the pros and cons and possible upgrades. Starting with the elephant in the room, you may have noticed that I don't actually have my peripherals set up on the desk itself. I'm not using the PC desk for my gaming desk. It's sitting off to the side. And that's because the desk is just so thick that my arms have to be reaching up to get the mouse and keyboard, which makes my shoulders tense and hurts. So, the desk that started as a way to save space ends up being something taking up way more space than it needs to, very inefficient, and just kind of gets in the way. So, it was a cool idea, I like how it turned out, but I definitely need to upgrade it. Whenever it comes to the PC itself, if you look at all the parts individually, they're great, but not exactly catered to be a package that is the PC that I currently need. So I'm definitely looking to upgrade the graphics card, the CPU, the RAM, and I have these really big plans to rebuild my PC into a different case that's really unique, because why not? And I'm gonna upgrade some of the components along the way, so stay tuned for that. I've been working on it in the background for a while now. It's just finding the parts at the right price, putting them all together in this very unique way. As you'll see, it is quite difficult, but for now, if you want to stay in the loop about what projects I'm working on, what I have coming up, and stuff like that, follow my Instagram at HopeStreamsAndDuctTape. And yeah, if you like what you're seeing, hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. And yeah, that's about all for today, folks. So until I see you next time, just have a good one, you know? Have a good day. I hope you have a good day. Catch you later.